Jake Martinez pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and watched the massive space station grow larger in the distance. The Galactic University Research Station looked like a giant wheel spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Thousands of lights dotted its surface, and smaller ships moved around it like busy insects. "First time seeing it?" asked Lisa Wong, the woman sitting next to him. She was also human, one of only 3 selected for this program from their entire planet. "Yeah," Jake replied, still staring at the station. "Hard to believe we made it this far." Ben Carter, the 3rd human student, leaned over from across the aisle. "I still can't wrap my head around it. 6 months ago, I was studying animals in a lab back on Earth. Now I'm going to study alien creatures with actual aliens." The transport ship docked with a soft thud that Jake felt through the floor. A mechanical voice announced their arrival in several different languages, including English. The 3 humans gathered their belongings and followed the other passengers toward the exit. The docking bay was huge, with a ceiling that stretched so high Jake could barely see the top. Dozens of different species moved around the area, some walking on legs, others floating, and a few that seemed to flow like liquid across the floor. Jake had studied pictures of alien species before coming here, but seeing them in person was completely different. "The humans, I presume," a voice said behind them. Jake turned to see a tall, thin creature approaching them. It stood almost 8 feet tall, with pale skin that seemed to glow slightly. Its limbs were longer than human proportions, and its head was larger, with big eyes that looked almost like jewels. This was a Zephyrian, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. "I am Veltar Nexus," the creature said in perfect English. "I have been assigned to show you to your quarters and explain the program." "Nice to meet you," Jake said, extending his hand. Veltar looked at the offered hand for a moment, before reluctantly touching it with one long finger. "How quaint," Veltar said. "Physical contact is a greeting. How very ... primitive." Lisa stepped forward. "We appreciate you taking the time to help us get settled." "Of course," Veltar said, already turning to walk away. "Follow me. Try not to get lost. The station can be confusing for those not used to advanced architecture." As they walked through the corridors, Jake noticed other alien students stopping to stare at them. Some pointed and made sounds that might have been laughter. Others simply watched with what looked like curiosity or confusion. "Popular, aren't we?" Ben whispered. "Most of the students here come from species that have been part of the galactic community for thousands of years," Veltar said without turning around. "Earth was only discovered 50 years ago. Many are wondering why such a young species was invited to join our program." "Maybe because we have something to offer?" Jake suggested. Veltar made a sound that could have been laughter. "Apps! Though I cannot imagine what a species that has barely left its own planet could teach us." They arrived at a section of the station marked with human symbols. Their quarters were small, but comfortable, with everything they needed for their stay. Veltar showed them how to use the various alien technologies, speaking slowly as if explaining things to children. "The main laboratory is on level 7, Veltar explained. "Classes begin tomorrow at what you would call 9 in the morning. The program focuses on studying apex predators from different worlds. Each species will present their homeworld's most dangerous creature." "Sounds interesting," Lisa said. "Indeed, we will be studying creatures that make your Earth animals look like harmless pets," Veltar said with obvious pride. "The Zephyrians will present the Shadow Stalker of our homeworld. It is invisible to most forms of detection and has never been successfully captured or studied alive." Jake felt a spark of interest. "What makes it so dangerous?" "It exists partially in another dimension," Veltar explained. "It can phase in and out of our reality at will. Our ancestors built entire cities underground to escape it. Even now, with all our technology, we cannot track it reliably." "That does sound impressive," Ben admitted. "The other species have equally formidable creatures," Veltar continued. "The Thokmari will present their crystal predator that can shatter itself into thousands of pieces and reform at will. The Nebulans have a creature made of pure energy that can drain the life from anything it touches. Even the peaceful Verdanians have a forest network that can coordinate attacks across entire continents." The three humans exchanged glances. Jake had been hoping to present something from Earth, but now he was wondering if they had anything that could compare to interdimensional stalkers and energy-draining wraiths. "What about Earth?" Lisa asked. "What will we present?" Veltar's large eyes seemed to sparkle with amusement. "That is up to you, of course, though I am curious what your primitive world has to offer. Perhaps one of your large sea creatures? Or maybe a reconstructed dinosaur from your planet's distant past?" "We have several options," Jake said carefully. He had spent years studying predators on Earth, but hearing about these alien creatures made him wonder if anything from his home planet could impress this crowd. "I'm sure you do," Veltar said, in a tone that suggested the opposite. "Well, I will leave you to settle in. Tomorrow's presentations should be quite educational for you." After Veltar left, the three humans sat in Jake's quarters to discuss their situation. "Well, that was encouraging," Ben said sarcastically. "He's not wrong." Though Lisa said, "How do we compete with creatures that can phase through dimensions?" Jake stared out the window at the stars. "Maybe we don't need to compete. Maybe we just need to show them something they haven't seen before." "Like what?" Ben asked. "I don't know yet," Jake admitted. "But I've spent my whole career studying predators. There has to be something special about Earth's creatures that these aliens haven't considered."
Ow!
Over the next few hours, Jake accessed the station's database and began researching Earth's predators. He looked at great white sharks, polar bears, saltwater crocodiles, and even extinct species like Tyrannosaurus rex, all impressive in their own ways. But none seemed to match the otherworldly abilities of the alien creatures. Then he found himself reading about tigers, specifically Siberian tigers. As he read, something clicked in his mind. These aliens were focused on supernatural abilities and advanced adaptations. They might be overlooking something simpler, yet more effective. "What are you thinking?" Lisa asked, noticing his expression. "Tigers," Jake said simply. "Tigers?" Ben looked confused. "Jake, we're talking about invisible creatures and energy beings. How is a tiger supposed to compete with that?" "Maybe not compete," Jake said slowly. "Maybe something better." Pulled up a video of a tiger hunting in the wild. The massive cat moved through dense forest with perfect silence, its striped coat blending perfectly with the shadows and sunlight. Its ears twitched constantly, picking up sounds too quiet for human hearing. Its nose tested the air, gathering information invisible to most other senses. "Look at it," Jake said. "Really look at it. This animal evolved to hunt in one of the most competitive environments on Earth. Every sense, every instinct, every hunting strategy was refined over millions of years." "But it's just a regular animal," Ben protested. "That's exactly the point," Jake said. "These aliens are so focused on supernatural abilities that they might have forgotten what pure, evolved hunting skill looks like." Lisa began to understand. "You think a tiger could actually track their invisible predator?" "I think a tiger might surprise them," Jake said. "But there's only one way to find out." The next morning, Jake woke early and spent more time studying tiger behavior and hunting techniques. By the time they arrived at the laboratory, he had made his decision. The laboratory was a huge circular room filled with alien technology Jake couldn't begin to understand. Students from a dozen different species filled the space, all talking in their various languages. When the three humans entered, the room grew quieter. "Ah, our primitive visitors have arrived," Veltar announced loudly. "I trust you have chosen your homeworld's champion?" Jake stepped forward. "We have. Excellent. Let us hear what Earth's apex predator can do." Jake took a deep breath. "We choose the Siberian tiger." The room erupted in sounds that Jake assumed was laughter from various species. Veltar's expression showed what could only be described as amused pity. "A tiger," Veltar said. "Simple. Striped mammal? This is your answer to creatures that manipulate dimensions and energy?" "Yes," Jake said firmly. "This should be interesting," said a Thokmori student, its crystal body ringing like wind chimes. "How exactly does this tiger plan? To hunt something it cannot see or detect?" Jake smiled. "It's what we're here to find out." The laughter in the laboratory continued for several minutes. Jake stood quietly, waiting for the alien students to finish their amusement. Lisa and Ben flanked him, trying to look confident despite the mocking sounds filling the room. "A tiger," repeated a nebulant student, its gaseous form rippling with what might have been laughter. "How delightfully simple. Does this creature have any special abilities at all?" "It hunts," Jake said simply. "So do many creatures," said a Verdanian, its bark-like skin creaking as it moved. "Our forest networks hunt across entire continents." "What makes your striped mammal special?" Before Jake could answer, Veltar raised one long arm for silence. The room gradually quieted, though Jake could still hear what sounded like chuckling. From various corners, "This is quite amusing," Veltar said, his large eyes glittering. "But perhaps we are being unfair to our human guests. After all, they come from such a young world. They may not understand what true predators are capable of." "We understand more than you think," Lisa said, stepping forward. "Do you?" Veltar asked. "Very well. Let me properly explain what we are dealing with." He moved to the center of the UHE room, where a holographic display activated at his gesture. The display showed a dark, twisted landscape under a purple sky. Strange trees with silver leaves swayed in an alien wind. The scene looked peaceful until something moved in the shadows. "This is Zephyr Prime, my homeworld," Veltar explained. "Isid. And this is why my people live in underground cities." The shadow moved again, and for just a moment, Jake caught a glimpse of something that made his skin crawl. It was roughly the size of a large dog, but its shape seemed to shift and blur. One second it had 4 legs, the next it seemed to have 6. Outline wavered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. "The Shadow Stalker," Veltar said with obvious pride, "exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Your 3-dimensional senses cannot fully perceive it. It can phase in and out of your reality at will, appearing behind you without warning. It has no scent in our dimension, makes no sound we can hear, and leaves no tracks we can follow." The hologram showed the creature hunting something that looked like a deer. The prey animal was grazing peacefully when suddenly it collapsed, dead. The Shadow Stalker hadn't appeared to move at all. It kills by partially phasing its claws into another dimension, then solidifying them inside its prey's vital organs. Veltar continued, "Death is instant and unavoidable. Our greatest scientists have studied this creature for centuries and still cannot fully understand how it works." The other alien students made sounds of appreciation and respect. To admit it was impressive, but he noticed something in the video that the others might have missed. The prey animal's ears had twitched just before it died, as if it had heard something. "It's fascinating," said the crystalline Thokmari student. "Allow me to present our contribution." The holographic display changed to show a desert landscape covered in strange, glittering sand. At first, nothing seemed to be moving. Then the sand itself began to shift and flow. "The crystal stalker of Thokmari Prime," the student explained. "It can shatter its body into thousands of microscopic fragments, each one sharp enough to cut through steel. It spreads these fragments across vast areas, creating invisible death traps. When prey steps on even one fragment, the entire creature can reform instantly around its victim." The hologram demonstrated this ability. A creature that looked like a 6-legged antelope stepped into what appeared to be empty desert. Suddenly, crystalline fragments erupted from the ground all around it, forming a cage of razor-sharp crystal that closed in from all sides. "The fragments are nearly transparent and make no sound when they move," the Thokmari continued. "They reflect light in such a way that they are invisible to most detection methods. Even our most advanced sensors struggle to locate all the pieces." Ben leaned over to Jake and whispered, "How is a tiger supposed to compete with that?" Add the Nebulan. Student floated forward next, its gaseous form shifting colors as it moved. "Our contribution is perhaps the most challenging of all." The display changed again, showing a world that looked like it was made of clouds and floating islands. Wisps of colored gas drifted between the floating land masses. "The Void Wraith," the Nebulan explained. "Pure energy given form and hunger. It feeds on the life force of other creatures, draining them completely. It can disperse itself into individual atoms, becoming one with the very air around you. You cannot see it, smell it, or touch it until it chooses to feed." The hologram showed a group of creatures similar to the nebulans themselves, floating peacefully among the clouds. Without warning, one of them began to dim and fade, its colors becoming dull and gray. Within seconds, it was nothing but empty. Space. The void wraith had consumed its entire life force without ever becoming visible. It can remain dispersed for days, following its prey undetected, the nebulon continued. When it feeds, the process is completely silent and leaves no trace. The victim simply ceases to exist. Even the Verdanian student, who had seemed reluctant to participate, stepped forward. Our world developed a different type of apex predator, the hunting grove. The display showed a forest that looked almost normal at first glance. The trees were tall and green, with normal-looking leaves and branches. But as Jake watched more carefully, he noticed that the entire forest seemed to be moving in perfect coordination. Individual trees are not the predator, the Verdanian explained. The entire forest network is a single organism. It can coordinate attacks across hundreds of square miles. Root systems communicate through chemical signals, sharing information about prey location and movement patterns. When the grove decides to hunt, every tree, bush, and blade of grass becomes part of the trap. The hologram demonstrated this terrifying ability. A large creature entered the forest, and at first everything seemed normal. Then gradually, Jake realized that the creature was being herded. Branches moved slightly to block certain paths. Roots shifted to create obstacles. The prey was being guided deeper into the forest without even realizing it. The grove learns from every hunt, the Verdanian said. It remembers the behavior patterns of different prey species and adapts its strategies accordingly. No creature has ever escaped once the grove begins hunting it. The room fell silent as the demonstration ended. Jake looked around at the faces of the alien students and saw confidence, pride, and barely concealed amusement when they looked at the humans. Impressive presentations, Veltar said. Now, humans, would you like to explain how your tiger plans to compete with creatures that exist in multiple dimensions, can become invisible, drain life energy, or coordinate attacks across continents? Jake felt the weight of every gaze in the room. These creatures were beyond anything he had imagined. Interdimensional stalkers, invisible crystal predators, energy vampires, and continent-spanning forest networks. What could a tiger possibly do against opponents like these? But then he remembered something his old professor had told him years ago during his wildlife studies. The most dangerous predator isn't always the one with the most exotic abilities. Sometimes it's the one that has perfected the basics. I think, Jake said slowly, that you're all missing something important. And what might that be? Beltar asked with obvious amusement. You're all focused on what makes your predators supernatural, Jake said. But you're forgetting that predators don't hunt in isolation. They hunt in environments filled with other predators, prey species, and countless variables. The best predator isn't the one with the most amazing ability. It's the one that can adapt to any situation. Tiger can adapt to hunting invisible, intangible, interdimensional creatures. The Thokmari asked, its crystal body ringing with what sounded like skepticism. There's only one way to find out, Jake said. Veltar's eyes seemed to light up with interest. Are you suggesting a practical demonstration? Why not? Jake replied. Your research station must have simulation capabilities. Indeed we do, Veltar said. Our holographic training chambers can recreate any environment with perfect accuracy. We could simulate encounters between your tiger and our predators. The idea seemed to excite the other students. Jake could hear them discussing the possibilities in their various languages. But surely you realize, Veltar continued, that this would not be a fair comparison. Your tiger is a physical creature that relies on normal senses. How can it possibly compete with predators that exist beyond normal physical laws? Maybe that's exactly why it can compete, Lisa said. Surprising everyone, including Jake, explained Veltar demanded. Lisa looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. Your predators all developed exotic abilities because they needed them in their specific environments. But what happens when you take them out of those environments? What happens when an interdimensional stalker has to hunt something that doesn't rely on three-dimensional senses to detect threats? You think your tiger's primitive senses are superior to our advanced detection methods? The Nebulan asked. I think Ben added, joining the discussion, that evolution doesn't care about advanced or primitive. It only cares about what works. It was quiet for a long moment, his large eyes studying the three humans. Finally, he spoke. Very well. This has the potential to be quite educational. I propose we conduct a series of simulated Nku. The holographic chamber was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The room was completely white and empty when they entered. But as soon as the technicians activated the system, it transformed into a dense forest that looked absolutely real. Trees rose high above them, their leaves rustling in a breeze that Jake could actually feel on his skin. The smell of earth and growing plants filled the air. Impressive technology, Ben whispered. The simulation is perfect down to the molecular level, Veltar explained proudly. Every sight, sound, smell, and physical sensation is exactly as it would be in a real environment. We have combined elements from multiple worlds to ensure no single species has an advantage. Jake walked through the simulated forest, touching tree bark that felt completely real under his fingers. Birds sang in the distance, and he could hear the sound of running water somewhere deeper in the woods. If he didn't know better, he would swear they were standing in an actual forest. The chamber can accommodate multiple subjects simultaneously, the Zephyrian technician explained. We will release all predators into the environment at the same time, then observe their behavior through our monitoring stations. The alien students gathered around various control panels that lined the walls of the chamber. Advanced displays showed readings that Jake couldn't understand, but he assumed they were tracking everything that happened inside the simulation. Are you ready to begin? Veltar asked the humans. Just one question, Jake said. Can I specify which tiger we use? Of course. You have access to our complete Earth database. Jake had already made his decision the night before. I want a female Siberian tiger, approximately 8 years old, with 2 cubs that are 6 months old. Several alien students made questioning sounds. Why those specifications? The Thokomari asked. A mother protecting her young is the most dangerous predator on Earth, Jake explained. Nothing is more focused, more determined, or more willing to face any threat. Interesting choice, Veltar said. Very well, technician. Please configure the simulation. The technician worked at his console for several minutes. Jake watched as the forest around them seemed to shift slightly, becoming even more detailed and realistic. All predators are now loaded into the simulation, the technician announced. The Shadow Stalker, Crystal Stalker, Void Wraith, and Hunting Grove are all active and hunting. The tiger and her cubs have been placed at the center of the territory. Begin recording, Veltar ordered. Jake moved to one of the observation stations, where he could watch the displays showing different views of the forest. At first, everything looked peaceful. Then he spotted the tiger. She was magnificent. Nearly 10 feet long and weighing over 400 pounds, she moved through the forest with perfect silence. Her orange and black stripes blended perfectly with the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. 2 small cubs stayed close to her sides, occasionally tumbling over each other as they tried to keep up. I don't see any of the other predators, Lisa said, studying the displays. That's the point, the Nebulan student replied. They are all present and hunting, but they cannot be detected by your primitive monitoring equipment, Jake continued. Watching the tiger? She was moving slowly through the forest, her massive head turning constantly as she scanned for threats. Her ears twitched every few seconds, and her nostrils flared as she tested the air. What is she doing? Ben asked. Being a mother, Jake said quietly. She knows something is wrong. She can sense danger even though she can't see it yet. The tiger suddenly stopped walking. Her entire body became perfectly still except for her ears, which swiveled like radar dishes. One of her cubs started to wander away from her side, but she immediately used her massive paw to gently push it back. Fascinating, Veltar said. But sensing that danger exists is not the same as being able to locate and counter specific threats. As if responding to his words, the tiger's behavior changed. She lowered her body closer to the ground and began moving in a completely different pattern. Instead of walking in straight lines, she started moving in careful arcs, pausing frequently. To test the air and listen, she's hunting, Jake realized. Hunting what? The Verdanian asked. There is nothing visible for her to hunt. The tiger moved to a large tree and rubbed against it, leaving her scent. Then she moved to another tree about 50 yards away and did the same thing. Jake watched as she systematically marked trees in a wide circle around her cubs. She's creating a perimeter, Lisa said. She's marking her territory to warn anything in the area that she's here and ready to fight. A pointless gesture, Veltar said. None of our predators care about scent. Markings. But Jake noticed something interesting on the monitoring displays. One of the readings had changed slightly when the tiger marked the second tree. It was barely noticeable, but something had reacted to her presence. The tiger finished marking her territory and returned to her cubs. But instead of settling down to rest, she began exhibiting behavior that Jake had never seen before. She was moving her head in slow, systematic sweeps, like she was scanning for something specific. Look at her ears, Ben said quietly. Jake focused on the tiger's ears. They were moving independently of each other, one pointing forward while the other angled to the side. Every few seconds, both ears would suddenly snap to point in the same direction, as if she had heard something. She's triangulating, Jake said with growing excitement. She's using her hearing to locate something that's moving around her. Impossible, Veltar said. The Shadow Stalker makes no sound in our dimension. But the tiger's behavior was becoming more focused. She was now looking directly at a specific area of forest about 30 yards away. Her body language had changed. Completely. Her muscles were tensed, her tail was twitching, and her eyes were locked on something the monitoring equipment couldn't detect. Then she did something that made every alien in the room. Gasped. The tiger made a sound Jake had never heard. Before, it was deeper than a roar, lower than a growl, more felt than heard. The sound seemed to come from deep in her chest and vibrated through the entire forest. What was that? Athokamari asked, its crystal body ringing with surprise. Jake said, his understanding suddenly clicking into place. She's using sound frequencies below the range of normal hearing. Tigers can produce and detect infrasound that travels for miles through dense forest. The monitoring displays suddenly showed a flicker of movement in the exact area where the tiger was looking. The Shadow Stalker, Veltar whispered. She detected the Shadow Stalker. The tiger was now moving with deadly purpose. She positioned her cubs behind a fallen log and began stalking toward the area where the Shadow Stalker was hidden. Her movements were completely silent, but Jake could see the intense focus in her eyes. This is impossible, Veltar said. The Shadow Stalker exists partially in another dimension. How can she track something that isn't fully present in our reality? Maybe because she's not trying to track something supernatural, Jake said. Maybe. She's tracking something that's still bound by physical laws. The tiger paused about 10 yards from her target. She crouched low, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. Then she did something that shocked everyone watching. She pounced at what appeared to be empty air. For a split second, happened then, suddenly, there was a terrible shriek that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Shadow Stalker became partially visible as it struggled, its form wavering between dimensions. The tiger had somehow grabbed it, her massive jaws clamped around something that kept flickering in and out of existence. How? Veltar demanded. Air displacement, Jake said, watching in amazement. Even if the Shadow Stalker exists in multiple dimensions, it still has to displace air when it moves. She tracked the tiny changes in air pressure and temperature. The Shadow Stalker managed to phase away and disappear again, but the tiger wasn't finished. She had learned something from that first contact. Now she was moving differently, following patterns that made no sense to the watching aliens. She's tracking its scent trail through dimensions, Ben said in wonder. Look how she's moving. She's following something we can't even detect. The tiger suddenly spun around and slashed at the air behind her. Again, the Shadow Stalker shrieked and became visible for a moment. This time, the tiger's claws had left deep gashes across its flank. Incredible, Veltar said. She's not just detecting it. She's learning how it moves between dimensions. But the real shock came when the monitoring displays started showing alerts from other areas of the forest. The tigers and Freysinan calls had done more than locate the shadow stalker. The deep, powerful vibrations were affecting the other predators as well. The crystal stalker's fragments are resonating, the Thokmari said in disbelief. The sound waves are causing them to vibrate at their natural frequency. They're becoming visible. Jake looked at the displays and saw thousands of tiny sparkles. Throughout the forest, like stars scattered on the ground, the crystal stalker's invisible fragments were all glowing faintly as the tiger's infrasound waves passed through them. And look at this, Lisa said, pointing to another display. The Void Wraith is reacting too. The dispersed energy creature was trying to maintain its invisible state, but the constant infrasound was disrupting its molecular cohesion. Parts of it kept flickering in. The silence in the chamber stretched on for what felt like hours. Jake watched the alien students stare at their monitoring displays, checking and rechecking the data from the simulation. Some of them were running the recordings over and over as if they couldn't believe what they had witnessed. There must be an error in the system, the Thokmari finally said, its crystal body ringing with frustration. Our predators are apex hunters. They've dominated their worlds for millions of years. The system is functioning perfectly, the Zephyrian technician replied. I have run full diagnostics twice. All readings are accurate. Veltar stood motionless, his large eyes fixed on the display showing the final moments of the simulation. The tiger was still there with her cubs, calmly grooming them as if nothing dangerous had happened. Around her, the forest showed signs of the chaos that had unfolded. Broken crystal fragments glittered on the ground, where the crystal stalker had been forced to retreat. Scorch marks on tree trunks showed where the Void Wraith had lost control and partially materialized. Even the plants looked disturbed, their coordinated network thrown into confusion. Run it again, Veltar said quietly. What? Jake asked. Run the simulation again? There must be something we missed, some factor we didn't account for. The results will be the same, Lisa said. The tiger didn't get lucky. She used specific hunting strategies developed over millions of years. Impossible, the Nebulan student said, its gaseous form rippling with agitation. Your creature is primitive, has no supernatural abilities. How can it defeat predators that exist beyond normal physical laws? Ben stepped forward and gestured toward the displays. That's exactly why it worked. Your predators are designed to hunt normal prey using extraordinary abilities. But what happens when they face prey that doesn't behave normally? Explain, Veltar demanded. Jake moved to one of the displays and pointed to the recordings of the tiger's behavior. Look at how she moved. She wasn't trying to hide from your predators or run away from them. She was actively hunting them. Your shadow stalker is invisible and makes no sound, Jake continued, but it still has to exist somewhere in space. It still displaces air when it moves. It still has a scent, even if that scent exists partially in another dimension. The tiger tracked all of those tiny clues that your technology ignores. Veltar's expression showed something that might have been confusion mixed with curiosity. But how did she know to look for such subtle signs? Because on Earth, that's what predators do, Jake said. They hunt other predators. A tiger doesn't just hunt deer and wild boar. It competes with leopards, wolves, bears, and sometimes even other tigers. Every one of those competitors has evolved ways to hide, to be silent, to avoid detection. So tigers evolved to find hidden threats, no matter how well they're concealed. The Verdanian student made a sound like wind blowing through leaves. Our hunting grove has coordinated attacks across continents. How did your tiger disrupt our communication network? Lisa pulled up another section of the recording. Watch this part where the tiger uses infrasound. Those low-frequency vibrations don't just travel through air. They travel through the ground, through water, through plant tissues. Your grove uses chemical signals to communicate between trees, but those chemical processes are sensitive to vibrations. The tiger accidentally jammed our communications? The Verdanian asked. Not accidentally, Ben corrected. Tigers use infrasound. to communicate with other tigers across long distances and dense forests, but they also use it as a hunting tool. Low-frequency sounds can disorient prey, disrupt the flight patterns of birds, even affect the behavior of fish in nearby streams. The tiger was using every tool available to control the hunting environment. The crystal stalker's student body chimed with what sounded like frustration. Our fragments are nearly invisible and make no sound. How did she locate them so precisely? Jake Jaggy smiled, remembering his years of studying big cats in the wild. Tigers hunt in forests, where light constantly changes. Sunlight filtering through leaves creates thousands of tiny reflections and refractions every second. A tiger's eyes evolved to detect the smallest variations in light patterns. Your crystal fragments might be nearly invisible, but they're not. Completely transparent. They bend light just enough for a tiger to notice. But more importantly, Jake continued, the tiger was listening to them. Impossible. Crystal fragments make no sound when they move. They make no sound you can hear, Jake corrected. But crystal has a natural resonance frequency. When the tiger used infrasound, it caused your fragments to vibrate at frequencies most species can't detect, but tigers can hear sounds far below the range of human hearing. She could literally hear your predator singing to her. The alien students were quiet again, processing this information. Jake could see them struggling to understand how their advanced predators had been outmatched by what they considered a primitive mammal. What about the void wraith? Nebulin asked reluctantly. It exists as pure energy dispersed across vast areas. How could any physical creature track it? Jake looked at the thermal readings from the simulation. Energy has to go somewhere. Your void wraith might be dispersed into individual atoms, but those atoms are still warmer than the surrounding environment. Tigers are excellent thermal hunters. They can detect temperature differences as small as a few degrees across long distances. But she did more than just track it, Lisa added, studying the data. She forced it to become visible by disrupting its molecular cohesion. How? Several alien students asked at once. Persistence hunting, Ben explained. It's one of the most effective strategies ever evolved on Earth. The tiger didn't try to catch the void wraith directly. She just kept applying pressure. The constant infrasound, the thermal tracking, the relentless pursuit. Eventually, the energy creature couldn't maintain its dispersed state under that kind of sustained pressure. Veltar was studying the recordings with intense focus. Show me the moment when she first detected the shadow stalker. The technician replayed that section of the simulation. Jake watched as the tiger's ears moved independently, tracking something invisible. There, Veltar said, pointing at the display, her ear movement patterns. They're following something specific. Micro-air currents, Jake said. Even something that exists partially in another dimension has to displace some air when it moves. The tiger was tracking air pressure changes so small that your instruments can't measure them. But that requires incredibly sensitive hearing. Tigers evolved to hunt in dense forests where vision is limited, Jake explained. They can hear a mouse moving under snow from hundreds of yards away. They can detect the footsteps of other predators through vibrations in the ground. Their hearing is calibrated to detect threats and opportunities that most creatures miss completely. The Thokomeri student was examining the crystal fragments scattered around the simulation area. She actually injured the shadow stalker. Did she know where to strike something that wasn't fully present in our dimension? Pattern recognition, Lisa said. Tigers are ambush predators. They study their prey's behavior patterns and predict where it will be, not where it is, the shadow. Stalker might exist in multiple dimensions, but it still has to follow logical movement patterns. The tiger learned those patterns and struck where she calculated it would appear next. In 3 attacks, Ben added, she went from random strikes to precise hits. That's learning and adaptation in real time. Veltar stepped back from the displays and looked directly at the 3 humans. For the first time since they had arrived at the station, his expression showed something other than condescension or amusement. Your species evolved alongside creatures like this, he said slowly. That's right, Jake said. And you survived. You thrived. You became the dominant species on a world populated by such hunters. We didn't just survive, Jake corrected. We learned from them, We competed with them, became them in many ways. Human persistence hunting, human pattern recognition, human adaptation skills, they all come from millions of years of competing with predators like tigers. The chamber was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. Jake could see. The alien students looking at the humans with new eyes, dismissive amusement was gone, replaced by something that looked like cautious respect. If your world produced predators this formidable, the Verdanian said slowly, and your species not only survived but dominated such an environment. ... Then maybe, Veltar said, finishing the thought, we have underestimated what Earth has to offer the galactic community. The Nebulan student's gaseous form shifted to a color Jake hadn't seen before. Your primitive world may not be primitive at all. No, Jake said. It's not primitive. It's just different. Earth didn't develop supernatural abilities or advanced technology first. Earth developed something else. What? Asked the THOK. Single quotes Mari. Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces, watching him with new attention. Survivors, he said simply. Earth developed survivors who could adapt to anything. The laboratory remained quiet for several more minutes as the alien students absorbed what they had witnessed. Jake watched them carefully, seeing the shift in their attitudes as the full implications of the demonstration sank in. Mockery and condescension were gone, replaced by something he had hoped to see from the beginning: genuine scientific curiosity. I need to understand something, Veltar said, breaking the silence. His voice had changed completely from the arrogant tone he had used before. If your tigers are this capable, what does that make your species? Jake exchanged glances with Lisa and Ben. This was the question he had been hoping someone would ask. The real lesson here, Jake said. Tigers are incredible predators, but they're not the most dangerous creatures on Earth. Humans are, explain, the Thokomari requested, its crystal body ringing with interest rather than skepticism. Ben stepped forward. Humans didn't just survive on a world with tigers, leopards, lions, wolves, bears, and countless other predators. We learned to compete with all of them. We studied their hunting techniques, copied their strategies, and eventually developed our own methods that were even more effective. More effective than the creature we just observed? The Nebulan asked. Much more effective, Lisa said. Tigers are ambush predators that rely on individual hunting skills. Humans developed something tigers never had: cooperation. We learned to hunt in coordinated groups, sharing information and working together to take down prey that no single human could handle alone. Jake pulled up images from the station's Earth database on one of the displays. Look at this, he said, showing recordings of human hunters tracking animals across vast distances. This is persistence hunting. Humans can track prey for days or even weeks, following tiny clues that most predators would miss. We can pursue our targets across any terrain, in any weather, until they're too exhausted to escape. But that's not the most impressive part, Ben added. Most impressive part is that humans can adapt these techniques to hunt anything, any predator, any prey, in any environment. Tigers are specialists. Humans are the ultimate generalists. Veltar studied the human hunting videos with intense concentration. You're saying that your species developed the ability to outhunt any creature on your world? Not just outhunt, Jake corrected, outthink. Humans don't just rely on physical abilities or even enhanced senses. We use tools, strategy, planning, and most importantly, we learn from every encounter. A human who survives an attack by a tiger becomes better at avoiding or defeating tigers. A human who successfully hunts a tiger learns techniques that can be applied to hunting anything else. The Verdanian made a sound like leaves rustling in wind. This explains much about your behavior during the simulation challenge. What do you mean? Lisa asked. You did not boast about your tiger's abilities? You did not try to intimidate us with descriptions of its supernatural powers? Instead, you quietly studied our predators, identified their weaknesses, and selected the Earth creature most likely to exploit those weaknesses. Jake smiled. Exactly. That's human thinking. We don't focus on what makes us superior. We focus on understanding our opponents and finding ways to defeat them. Even when facing creatures with abilities far beyond your natural capabilities, the Thokamari observed. Especially then, Ben said. The more exotic the threat, the more interesting the challenge becomes. Humans have a saying, if it bleeds, we can kill it. It doesn't matter if something is invisible, intangible, or exists in multiple dimensions. If it's a living creature, there's a way to defeat it. The alien students were quiet again, but Jake could see them processing this information differently than before. They were no longer looking at humans as primitive newcomers who had somehow stumbled into the galactic community. They were beginning to see humans as something potentially dangerous. You're telling us, Veltar said slowly, that your entire species consists of apex predators. In a way, yes, Jake said. But here's what's really important. We didn't come here to prove we're superior to anyone. We came here to learn. Learn what? The Nebulon asked. Everything, Lisa said. Your species all developed incredible abilities and technologies. You've solved problems that humans haven't even thought of yet. You've created civilizations that span star systems. You understand sciences that we're only beginning to discover. But we've also developed approaches to problem solving that you might not have considered, Ben added. We've learned to adapt to any situation, to find solutions when conventional methods fail, to survive and thrive in conditions that would destroy other species. Jake gestured toward the simulation chamber. What happened in there wasn't about proving that tigers are better than your predators. It was about showing that different evolutionary paths lead to different solutions. Your predators are perfectly adapted to their specific environments and hunting styles. Tigers are adapted for versatility and adaptation itself. And humans? Veltar asked. Humans are adapted for learning, Jake said. We're adapted for taking the best ideas from anywhere and making them work in new situations. We're adapted for cooperation, innovation, and survival. The Thokamari student moved closer to the humans, its crystal body catching the light and rainbow. Patterns. You're saying that humans could learn to counter our predators' abilities? Given enough time and information? Probably, Jake admitted. But that's not the point. The point is that we don't have to be competitors. We can be partners. Partners, several alien students asked at once. Lisa stepped forward. Think about it. Your species have developed amazing technologies and abilities. Humans have developed adaptability and problem-solving skills. What could we accomplish if we combined those strengths? Your interdimensional technology could open up entirely new approaches to exploration and research, Ben said to Veltar. Human persistence and adaptability could help you solve problems that have stumped your scientists for centuries. Energy manipulation abilities, Jake said to the Nebulon, combined with human innovation, could lead to discoveries neither of our species could make alone. The laboratory buzzed with quiet conversations as the alien students discussed this possibility among themselves. Jake could hear fragments of discussion in various languages. And while he couldn't understand the words, the tone had shifted from suspicious to intrigued. There is wisdom in this approach, the Verdanian said finally. Our species have each perfected different aspects of science and survival. Cooperation could indeed yield benefits that none of us could achieve alone. Veltar was quiet for a long time, his large eyes studying the three humans. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a respect that hadn't been there before. I owe you an apology, he said. When you arrived here, I assumed you were primitive creatures from a backwater world who had nothing to contribute to our advanced program. I was wrong. You weren't entirely wrong, Jake said. Earth is young compared to your worlds. Our technology is primitive compared to yours. But different doesn't always mean inferior. No, Veltar agreed. It doesn't. Real lesson here. The galaxy has become focused on technological advancement and exotic abilities. We may have forgotten that there are other forms of strength and intelligence. The Nebulon student drifted closer. Would you be willing to share your knowledge with us? To teach us about Earth's approaches to survival and adaptation? Of course, Lisa said. But only if you're willing to teach us about your technologies and abilities. Real partnership means everyone learns from everyone else. I propose, Veltar said formally, that we establish a new research program. A cooperation between species that focuses on combining different evolutionary approaches to problem solving. The suggestion generated excited discussions among all the alien students. Jake watched with satisfaction as species that had barely acknowledged each other, began planning joint research projects. What would you call such a program? Thokmeri asked. Jake thought about it for a moment. How about adaptive solutions? A program dedicated to finding new ways to solve old problems by combining different approaches. Adaptive solutions, Veltar repeated. I like that.
Nice.
It captures the essence of what humans seem to represent, the ability to adapt and find solutions regardless of the circumstances. Over the following hours, the alien students transformed from skeptical competitors into eager collaborators. They began sharing information about their homeworlds, their technologies, and their scientific challenges. The humans, in turn, shared Earth's approaches to those same challenges, the research station's communication. Systems buzzed with activity as word of the demonstration spread to other parts of the galactic community. Scientists from dozens of species requested access to the data from the Tiger simulation. Universities across the galaxy began proposing joint research programs with Earth institutions. You realize what you've started? Veltar said to Jake as they watched the activity around them. A revolution in how we approach scientific cooperation, Jake suggested. Perhaps just the recognition that intelligence and capability come in many different forms. Veltar extended his long arm to Jake, offering a proper handshake. Welcome to the galactic community, Jake Martinez. Not as primitive newcomers, but as equals and partners.
Ouch.
Shook Veltar's hand firmly.